Hi, Stacey. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Lauren. It's so nice to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you. Okay, so tell everyone who you are and what you do.
Okay, well, I tell you that, I did want to mention we met. I don't know if you remember this years ago at Watermark Conference
I
for,
do.
and we met in February of 2020. We sat
Hmm.
next to each other watching Megan Rapinoe speak about, equal pay for women, which they hadn't done for U.S. women's soccer at that point. And then the world shut down like a
Yes,
month later. It was crazy. Do
I
you
do
remember?
remember. Yes, I,
Yeah.
I totally remember this. And it's funny because I went to, now they call it California Conference for Women. I went to it
Right.
this year. And it was just funny because I was like, last time I was at this, the world shut down like weeks later. And like
Later.
just crossing my fingers, nothing weird happens this time. But yeah, it's totally, we did. We sat at a table and then a couple weeks later, the world shut down.
Right. And it
And
was
it,
such an
I,
important event for so many for women. And and then the pandemic was so hard on women. I just found that juxtaposition so interesting at the time.
yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because it's been like 4-ish years, but it doesn't feel that way.
Oh, right. It's four times.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Okay, so everyone knows that we know each other, but
Okay.
introduce yourself so they know what you do and who you are.
Thank you for that. So yeah, I'm Stacey Delo. I run Après, which is a career resource coaching service for women who are returning to work after career breaks, really anyone who's returning to work after career breaks. It just happens to largely be that we serve women. Um, or people who are looking to pivot usually to something better. I like to call it something more meaningful, something that allows them to have a little more autonomy over their life. But we tend to really work with folks who have taken strategic or extended career breaks and are now looking to re-engage with the workforce. And as a part of that, we also work with employers who see value in hiring that demographic. So we have a job board and all sorts of things to help people that are on that journey.
Yeah, I
I'm
feel
also,
like,
oh, go
oh,
ahead.
sorry, go on.
Oh, I was just like, I always forget to plug my book. I'm also the co-author of Your Turn Careers, Kids and Comebacks, a Working Mother's Guide. So I've been in this space for over 10 years now, and it's still very near and dear to my heart. It's one of those areas that continues to just um, present new challenges for working parents, working mothers, and, progress along the way. So,
Yeah, it's
lots.
one step forward, two steps back feels like the progress that keeps being made around here. But
Yeah,
that's probably a conversation for another day. Actually, maybe it will work its way into
maybe
our
today.
conversation today. Yeah,
Yeah.
because there are so many scary narratives around career breaks for women. One, can you share a couple of the narratives? And two, I mean, what do you guys consider a career break? Like, is it a certain time? Is it a time of life? Like, I think it would be good to have a definition that we're all working off of.
Good question. So it is, it we can go way back in time to when we were really young and starting out in our careers. And, the message was always, oh, she's taking a career break. She must have lost all her ambition. Or, goodness, isn't it really nice that she can just sit around and eat bonbons all day? There's all these different narratives. And then it sort of turns into these messages that we internalize and actually say to other women. So I remember when I was considering going part-time after having my first baby, women would say to me, "Oh, you should never go part-time because you'll never make as much money and you'll be working just as hard and giving up that income." Okay, fair enough. There's probably some truth in that you're not making as much money if you're working full time, but we can get into some of the boundaries that you can set to actually work part time if you're going to work part time. And then things that are even more outlandish, such as if you take a career break, you'll never be able to get back in, and you're just left kind of stunned, going, "Oh my!" And
Yeah.
we put all this pressure then on women who might be feeling burned out, who might be really in need of a break or really just want to take one. And we can talk about the reasons that people take breaks, because they're often not all of the reasons that we have, as a society, decided that that's why they take breaks. But for whatever reason, we just put all this pressure, and it just kind of builds and it festers. And I think it leads to a lot more, um, issues and problems, mental health for ourselves, how it comes out to others. So anyway, and in terms of what a career break is, I like to say they come in all shapes and sizes. Um, a career break can be time out of the workforce, in my opinion, for anything, right? Often with women, it is for caregiving of children. Sometimes it's caregiving of parents or a spouse. A large portion of our um, demographic is not just caring for children, but they're also caring for elderly, their parents.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's for their own personal health reasons. Sometimes somebody's been pushed out of the workforce. We talk to a lot of women who maybe their spouse has gotten a job abroad and they're legally not allowed to work until they come back to the States. So there's all different types of, sometimes, it could be something like you are a shift worker and you can't find reliable childcare because you're not able to predict your shift. So there's all sorts of things that happen that cause people to step out of the workforce. And I think the more that we can talk about it in sort of, normalize it as something like you step off, you step back in, you step out, you step back in,
Right.
instead of the stigma that people assign to it.
Yeah, it's definitely, as someone who just went from entrepreneurship back into quote corporate, even that, it's like the lines are so like drawn in the cement of like, you're in a career break, you're not, you're an entrepreneur, you're not. And it's like, I wish there was just more ebb and flow for everything and anything out there. I get it. People like to live more in this like black and white clear, like they feel like there's more clarity and predictability. It feels like a little safer. Unfortunately, I just don't think that's how it's all set up today. And I think what you're talking about, career breaks come in all shapes and sizes, whether it's a 6-month break, you're taking a sabbatical for some reason, you were laid off, so you're going to take a 6-month break before you start searching again. Any of these things are considered career breaks, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, I do think so. We've had employers come to us and say, we'd like to hire folks returning to work. And you say, okay, well, what does that mean to you? And they say, well, returning to work from parental leave. And that's something that, first of all, you're not on a break when you're on
Yeah.
parental leave, really of any caregiving kind. But their definitions shift. I tend to think of a career break as a time that somebody has either intentionally decided that they're going to take away from the workforce, or because of reasons beyond their control. They've got, what you might consider a gap in
Yeah.
your resume. I don't
Yeah.
know. Do you hear that from, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think career gap and career break live in the same world together.
Mhm.
And people get concerned when they have, usually it's, I had a career break, so now I have a gap on my resume. That's usually the language I hear. For employers, it all totally depends on who the employer is, what they're hiring for. Is it
Right.
a more skill-based job? It really, that one's harder to give a direct answer. But I do think there is more talk about career breaks today in a positive light than there ever was before. I think when LinkedIn allowed you to have career break as an experience on your LinkedIn profile, I think that started to move the conversation and move the needle in a positive way. So I'm hopeful that conversations like this will continue, and that decision makers will be, maybe stereotype a little bit less. But I know that there are a lot of people right now who, and maybe it was because of COVID or because of layoffs, there are a lot of people who have a quote career break, or maybe want to take a career break. And I guess my next question for you would be, is there a way to take a career break without undoing all your work? What's the value that you get from having a career break? And, there's obviously the scary narratives out there, but like, what happens if you want to do this?
Right. I have this vision sometimes of a career break where you're like, I'm going to take a career break, and you pack up your bag at the office and you throw it all in there, all your years of education, all your years of experience, all of the wins and challenges that you went through in your career, and you just zip it all up and you walk out the door and you put it on a shelf at home, and that's it. Like, that's kind of how I think people feel about taking a career break, when in fact it couldn't be further from the truth. You're actually taking the bag with you, and the amalgamation of all of those experiences combined with the new ones that you're gaining and whatever it is that's next for you. So we know that in caregiving, your brain, there's great research on this done by a woman named Amy Henderson, but she talks a lot about how and I'm not a brain expert, but a portion of your brain actually expands when you're a caregiver, and you turn all of these transferable skills, which are skill sets that employers really have trouble training for. So employers know that they can train you for the widgets that they sell, or whatever software it is. Whatever they're doing, they know that they can teach you the specifics, but they can't train you to have empathy. They can't always train you to have good communication skills, problem solving skills, project management. All of these are skill sets that come from taking a break, particularly when it amounts to caregiving. That being said, the ability to step away from something that you might have chosen as a young person to be your career and have a new perspective because you have a little more space to breathe around it can really give you the opportunity to go back into the workforce in a much better, healthier, smarter, potentially happier way. So, I tend to look at career breaks, and the employers that we work with feel the same way, that there's actual value in the time that you had away from whatever the career is that you initially had.
Mm-hmm. So for someone who is saying, I want to take a career break, how do they make sure it's a quote successful career break? And what I'm thinking as a successful career break is a way to like not throw it all away, to be able to ebb and flow between the two worlds if they want to come back. So are there steps or kind of like tangible pieces of advice that you could give women today who are thinking, I might want to take, leave the job I'm in, or I just got laid off, so this is an opportunity to take a break. So how do I make it a successful one?
Sure. So the first thing that I would suggest is that you actually try to set some boundaries around it. Now, we've worked with women who have taken 15 to 20-year career breaks who successfully get back into the workforce. But career breaks tend to be shorter in scope, especially in kind of the younger generations that are coming up. They tend to take very strategic certain number of years that they've outlined career breaks. So for example, if you know that you are interested in being with your young babies, right? Say maybe up until the time they're in kindergarten, then set a timeline for yourself and set some boundaries. I'm going to take a 3 to 5 year career break. And as you're telling people and leaving your current place of work, you can tell people this, like speak out loud about it. Tell them about your intention of why you're doing this. It's important to me to do X, Y, and Z. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to be reaching out. I'm going to start to call you as I'm starting to relaunch back into the workforce. So I really think it's a good idea to set some boundaries if you can. And that will help you have a good sense of why you're doing what you're doing. I think some of women that I know who have taken really successful career breaks were really, they were certain about why. And, I think the worst thing that you can do is step out of the workforce and then just worry about it. Try to actually feel settled in the decision and the moment, because it will allow you then to expand your own horizons on that break, as opposed to spending all the time worrying and being stressed about whether you're going to get back in. And then you will also, be able to enjoy the moment, which I think is really a critical feature. But you'll be able to understand in your own head when you are ready to, or when you're going to start taking those steps back into the workforce.
Yeah, so part of setting the boundaries is also being very clear about how long you're going to be leaving and why you're leaving, so that maybe when you start to get in your own head, you kind of have this backup of like, you remember you had all your ducks in a row. This is why you were doing it. You planned for it. I mean, is that something too, like with a successful career break, it's something you should plan for, like financially plan for, career-wise plan for? Like, what does that planning look like?
I mean, that'll look differently for everybody, but I also feel like one of the narratives is, oh, you're stepping out of the workforce and you're giving up all this income and you're losing, and it's true, right? There's the reality of that. You're stepping out, you're not getting paid. Maybe you should be, but you're not. And so, but the idea that, um, you can't, I'm talking over my own words here, but you can prepare financially, to also kind of help yourself feel a bit better in that moment. So you could actually, if you know that this is important to you, you could start saving ahead. And I'm not a financial planner, but you could start saving ahead, and have a little bit of a cushion for yourself, which also can be helpful with if you have a partner or a spouse, in some of the guilt that comes from when you step out of the workforce and you feel like you're not contributing to the household financially. If you've put a little bit aside, that you can say, actually, I'm going to pull from this, and kind of maintain a little bit of your own independence and confidence. I mean, maintaining your confidence through all of this is really the most critical part. And so one of the things I like to tell people to do is, celebrate your wins and like write them down and put them in little parts of your house, so that you can open a drawer one day and be like, oh, that's right. I remember that. I remember that meeting, and I really crushed it. Just to help your brain kind of recall the pieces of you that aren't, in the moment, putting cream cheese on the bagel, right?
Yeah, well, it's actually funny. I was going to ask you, so in your step plan, you basically had number one, which is set boundaries for what your career break is going to look like. Number two, which is quit gracefully. So that's literally do not burn any bridges. Let
Yeah.
people know that when you're going to be returning. Well, number three was prepare for and take steps to ease the identity crisis, which I think is sort of what you're talking about. But go a little deeper into this, because to your point, yeah, spreading cream cheese on someone's bagel might not be the same feeling as crushing it. Or as my friend always says, I need someone to pay me for my professional opinion. That is very important to her.
Oh, yeah,
Which is
yeah.
why she doesn't take a career break, because she's like, I don't want to leave the workforce because that's something I need in my life. So anyway, go
But I
further
like
down.
that because she knows that about herself, right? So I think for somebody who might have, might want to do both, right? Who might want to feel validated for their professional opinion, but also might want a little more wiggle room on the caregiving side of things. You can find different ways to feed that part of you. So, a lot of women, I mean, I always say, like, the backbone of America is built on women's volunteer work, right? So there are actually really strategic volunteer opportunities that you can do if you aren't in the quote unquote paid workforce. There are actual sites that you can go to, and you could do marketing for a nonprofit, and it's genuine work, but it wouldn't be quite as of a heavy lift. But it kind of nurtures that other side of you. You can also take on freelance or contract work, right? There's nothing that says it has to be all or nothing. And whether that constitutes as a career break or not, maybe it looks more like a little bit of a hybrid mode that you're in, but also recognizing that you're not, I think that's one of the biggest struggles that people go through is nobody is saying to you, if you're just in full-on caregiver mode, nobody is saying to you, great job, the way you cream cheese that bagel, that was awesome. Um, and you have to really, step into understanding that that's going to happen, and then find people around you to feed it, whether it's taking a class, whether it's getting together with a bunch of your friends who might be in a similar mode, but finding the people who can fuel you in those sort of confidence sucking moments. But one of the resources that I always like to mention is Eve Rodsky's Fair Play. I think that book is really genius in helping people sort through the fairness and equality of a household, and just because you might be doing more of the transporting of kids to events, or the organization or household management, doesn't mean that you have to be doing all of it. And so finding ways to talk about that with a partner, I think, is really critical.
Yeah, and I like that you are mentioning like to prepare for sort of this identity crisis ahead of time. I think it makes the when it's happening to you, maybe a little less painful because you're like, okay, there's not something wrong with me that this is happening. This is sort of part of the expectation. I'm going through this shift and this change. And so an identity crisis, similar to changing jobs, changing roles, anything like that, it's almost like an uncertainty intolerance. And we have to learn how to tolerate that a little bit more.
Yeah. And don't, I find also that sometimes people will, if they've put a lot of support structure in place before they leave the workforce, maybe you don't need to give up all of that support structure, right? I mean, financially, you'll have to make some choices potentially, but don't just destroy everything that you've put in place to sort of help keep things running. See how it goes for a little while and decide what are the critical pieces to keep or not keep. But instead of just kind of pulling the ripcord on all of it and being like, I'm going to handle all of this now, kind of give yourself a minute to settle into what it will look like, and then decide what those pieces that should stay or should go.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, number 4 on your list is to protect your confidence. And you talked about this a little bit, to sit down and write out your accomplishments, personal and professional, and keep them in a place where you can refer to when you need kind of that boost. I also think it's really important to remember what your accomplishments are at your job, because if you go back to the job or looking for a job in 3 to 5 years, you might forget a little bit, right? So
Yes.
like documenting some of this stuff right now, like what have you accomplished in this job? What are your wins? Stuff that you would want to talk about in a future interview. Obviously, you're going to also want to talk about whatever you've done during those 3 to 5 years. But I'm just saying, like, we forget what we did last week.
For sure. So keep notes, take notes, right? And I think when it's really fresh, if you're just leaving a job, when it's really fresh, write all those things down immediately. Because you'll never be as close to them as you are now. I mean, I
Yeah.
think it's a good habit, even while we are employed, to keep a list of those things handy, because like you said, things just roll quickly and we forget even when we're
Yeah.
in the moment. And then also, I think it's good to keep people around you that can remind you of those attributes as well. I really am a strong believer in keeping, and I think this is my final like tip on all of this, but to keep your network warm, but more importantly, on kind of reminding yourself of what your wins are in that network of keep a few people that are really good at helping you kind of shore up and remember all those good things about yourself. Because
Yeah.
there are other people who will be in your network who will be strategically helpful, but may not be as good at doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. When you say keep your network warm, what does that look like? Does that mean emailing people every once in a while, being really active on LinkedIn? Like what does it look like when you're on a career break and maybe you feel like you don't really have a lot to add to that conversation, but you want to stay in touch with the person?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think LinkedIn has made it so easy for us to have this really light touch way of staying in touch with people. So it doesn't take any time to go on LinkedIn, maybe sometimes it can, depending what rabbit hole you go down. But if you're just going on to sort of check what's happening with the folks that you like their posts, maybe you make a comment now and then. You don't have to write your own post. You don't have to write something super intelligent to follow up or comment, but just to kind of keep that light touch of, I'm still here. I'm still out there. And then when you reach out potentially later on, it's not as though you completely disappeared off the face of, the earth. They know that you've been kind of here and there checking in. I also think it is nice. I always look at the holiday card is a really nice, easy way to stay in touch with people. Again, it's very low touch. It goes out to folks, but it reminds them that you're still living and breathing and working, doing something.
Yeah.
And so I just think there's lots. You can decide, maybe pick like 5 people in that broader network that you want to stay in more close contact with. And with those folks, maybe you grab coffee with them once in a while. Maybe you have a lunch once in a while. And by once in a while, it could be like once a year. It doesn't have to be every few months. But just to keep in touch so that when it is time to really push that go button, you're not coming out of nowhere.
Yeah. Last question in how to kind of navigate and create a successful career break. What about skill building? AI is everywhere today. You can't ignore that. For someone who maybe took a career break last year, maybe AI wasn't part of their job skills.
Sure.
Um, how much of a successful career break includes, ongoing continuing education, taking online courses? I mean, I feel like certain skills are best learned on the job. So sometimes this is a little bit challenging, but what are your thoughts on that? And what have you seen other women do?
Well, again, I mean, AI is such a big one because it's touching everything, right? I think that there might be value in a at least being up to speed on a primer of how it works, or having played around with some of the tools yourself, or having a perspective on how it's going to potentially transform the career space that you're interested in. But my sense is that for the most part, look, women are more educated than men. They get more undergrad degrees. They get more um, masters and above degrees than men. And the amount of time that someone works, like that career break, when they take a career break, they often have, because people have kids later, they often have 10, 15 plus years of experience before they've even had their first baby. So there's so much skill and experience in that package itself, that what I think the best way to start your job search is to get really clear and focused on what it is that you're interested in doing. I think the job search world has really changed a lot, even in the time that I've been in it. There are so many open jobs, right? Right now it's just over 8 million in the US. And to go on these sites now that make it very easy to look at jobs, you can really just get overwhelmed and blurry-eyed just looking at the at the number of roles, and it almost serves as a disservice, even though the access to the information and the access to be able to apply so easily is wonderful. It can serve as a disservice to folks that are maybe not quite as clear about what it is that they want to do. So I think the best thing that you can do is really do the work to think, do I want to do what I used to do? Do I want to do something different? What does different look like? How does the old skill set that I have apply to the new thing that I would like to potentially do? And then what are the pieces that I need to put in place to actually go out and do that? So is it polishing up with a little bit of, what we like to call upskilling, right? Where you take a course, maybe it's understanding that marketing has really changed in the last 10 to 15 years, right? It's much more, it's a lot more specific in data than it was at one time. So do you have that? You have the data analytics skills that are needed to really go into a good marketing role. Look at what those pieces are, read the job descriptions, and then start to put your materials together. So I think, it depends on most people. I feel like don't really need a lot of different new skills. It's just a matter of how the skills that they have apply to the roles that they're looking for.
Yeah, I think to your point too, having a successful career break is it's no different than having a successful career. It's being proactive about it, right? It's not just sort of saying, I'm going to stick my head in the sand and not pay attention at all, because one day you might need to pay attention and it's a lot harder to go back. So I like your points about keeping your network warm, quit gracefully, have a plan of attack ahead of time. Go through maybe the steps of like putting the fair play model into you and your partner's relationship first, so that it's not, to your point, like a complete shift from managing a team to all of a sudden now you're in charge of the carpool and that feels like it's it. I think the lesson I've had in all major changes to make them go a little smoother is like proactively plan for what you can control, be open to the things that you can't, and then also just like maybe don't throw 100% change on you all at once. It's like small increments seems to
Small
work a little
increments.
better. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Stacey, this has been really, really eye-opening and very helpful. Where can people learn more about you and get more information if they are thinking about a career break, or maybe they're on a career break right now and they want to make sure they're kind of being proactive about it?
Sure. You can go to our website is apregroup.com. I'll spell it. It's APRESGROUP.com. And we have a whole host of free resources there for people that are contemplating getting back into the workforce, maybe just looking for something a little bit different, or thinking about a career break. And I have to tell you that all of it is steeped in the idea that it is your turn. It is your turn to decide for yourself what it is that you want to do. And that for many people feels a little bit of like a selfish position when we're kind of trained as women in particular to be taking care of everyone around us. But it's the idea that you can settle into the skills and the education that you have and what you bring to the table, and be a little selfish about what it is that you want to do next in your career, because anyone will be very lucky to have you. And just knowing that there are employers out there that are looking to hire people who have the added value of a career break can be really comforting.
Amazing. And I will also link to Stacey's LinkedIn profile so you guys can connect with Stacey there as well. Stacey, thank you so much. This has been great.
Thank you.